Phil Dobson here, author of the Brain Book and founder of BrainWorkshops. In this video, I want to give you 3 tips to help you break your goals into processes. So in a previous video, hopefully you got clarity on your year goals, right? By understanding your long-term vision, making some priorities for this year, and then getting clarity and specificity on what progress you'll make in the next 12 months or of each of your 3 to 5 key objectives, your priorities for this year. So what we now need to do is to turn these things into processes, understanding steps or habits, or breaking goals down into smaller time frames to make sure that you make progress consistently and therefore that these goals become inevitable. So goals are important. I would argue processes, habits, behaviors, actions, well, they're even more important because they're the things that makes the goals inevitable. So 3 tips. Tip number 1, break goals into 5 major moves. That's the first tip. Most goals, I think, are sequential or chronological. They are the slow achievement towards an objective based on a number of steps. That makes sense? So writing a book or setting up a business are good examples. You do one thing and once that's complete, you move on to the next, etc., etc. So the first step for you to break goals into process is to look at your goals, and for anything that is sequential in its nature, and you can see in terms of building a ticking off of things, what I want you now to do is to spend a few minutes establishing your 5 major moves. What are the 5 steps, the 5 landmarks that will get you from where you are now to the completion of that goal? Pause the video, spend some time getting clarity on this, because the clearer you are on these 5 major moves, the easier progress will become. And you'll notice as you do this, once you get real clarity on 5 major moves, it suddenly becomes much easier and much less overwhelming, because ultimately, once you've broken things into steps, you get the benefit of knowing that, well, until you've achieved step 1, step 2 to 5, aren't really that important. So suddenly you break things down into a sequence and it's much easier. So pause the video, do that now. Right, step 2, establish your 1 to 3 key habits that will make other goals inevitable. You see, not all goals are equal and not all goals are necessarily best broken down into steps, sequences, and time frames. For example, getting fit, right? Firstly, that isn't really a valid specific goal, but even if running a marathon under a certain time on a particular date is specific, I don't think the best route to achieving that goal is through breaking things into major moves. Instead, it's about understanding your key habits, daily and weekly routines that would make achieving that goal inevitable. Sales would be another good example. Selling more by the end of the year, even achieving a particular growth figure, well, that's a valid goal, but it probably isn't best served in terms of steps, such as creating a list of prospects, calling them, doing all that. You could break it into steps, but what might be of greater value is thinking, right, what are the habits that if I were to increase the frequency with which I did this, and I was consistent in doing it, success would almost be guaranteed. That's the way to think about other goals. Lifestyle goals, being more creative, valid, but it's not necessarily something that takes steps. It's about having daily habits that means you express yourself more regularly. So that's the next step. Any other goals that aren't best broken into steps? Now, do a brainstorm of all the habits, all the behaviors, all the things you could do more of to make that goal inevitable, and then prioritize. Decide on your key habit, maybe 2, possibly 3. And once you've got clarity on that, you need to then turn them into routines. And with any form of habit generation or behavioral change, the best tip is to start as small as possible, make it as easy as possible. So break habits into the smallest, tiniest bit. Do it as little as possible and then build on your success, right? So that's the second step, key habits. And then the third step, I think, to break goals into processes is then to calendarize the lot so that you can set now quarterly goals. What progress will you make on these goals in the next 3 months or 13 weeks? This is critical. If you've got clarity on year goals, great, but the next step has to be clarity on your quarterly goals, and I feel you can only really do that once you understand your major moves and your key habits. But now you've got clarity on the steps and the behaviors that are necessary, now you need to get your calendar out and book in the next 3 months. Acknowledging when are you going to make progress on these major moves, what days specifically you need to commit to it, and the only way to do that is to book it in your calendar. Similarly, for these habits that you now know would make a massive difference to your life, when are you going to do it? Is it every Monday? Is it every day? Is it in the afternoons? Is it once a week on a Friday? You now need to decide this stuff, and again, get experimenting. Become your own beautiful behavioral experiment, the most compelling subject you're ever likely to have. So that's it. Step 1, major moves. Step 2, key habits. Step 3, calendarization towards a quarterly objective, quarterly goals. Once you get this habit, and once you always start to break your goals into processes and always think about success that you will sort of progress you'll make in the next 3 months, 13 weeks, I guarantee you'll be more successful. You'll make more consistent progress, and that's really the key. And it will improve your well-being. People like making progress towards goals that they find meaningful. So if at the end of every quarter you also now make time for reviewing your progress, to adapt, to maybe make small changes, then all the better. But for now, spend some time doing the steps we've just discussed. Turn sequence-based goals into 5 major moves. Get clarity on them. Turn other lifestyle or behavioral goals into key habits. Brainstorm them all, but get clarity. What's the one thing that if you were to do that more regularly, the goal would be inevitable? And then step 3, like I said, quarter goals and calendarization of the next 13 weeks, committing your time to the things that you've now established are the most important things for you to do with some regularity. Okay, the very best of luck. Until next time, go to the website brainworkshops.co.uk. Subscribe if you haven't done so already, and please, if you think someone else that you know would find this video valuable, please share. Okay, best of luck. Until next time.